Good afternoon. I'm back.
Hi, Dr. Richards.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Going to do another interview today with another person who has some interesting connections to the library. And our guest today is Michael Delorge. Michael, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Richards. My name is Michael Delorge. I am, a graduated senior of the class of 2020. I'm from Biddeford, Maine. I was born and raised here in Biddeford, and I just graduated from the Maine School of Science and Mathematics up in Limestone, Maine, in Aroostook County, about 5.5 hours away from where I live. So for the past 3 years, I've gotten to see a different side of Maine, which has been really cool. And yeah, I love Maine. I love being here in Maine, and seeing those two different sides of the state past few years has been great.
Very good. So there's a couple of topics that I want to address at the outset, the connections that you have to the Margaret Chase Smith Library. But then I do want to move on and hear more about your time with the Maine School of Science and Math. And so you gave me a perfect lead-in in that you said you love Maine, and that's a lead-in to talk about our essay contest, which we hold annually.
Yeah.
This year was the 24th annual Margaret Chase Smith Essay Contest. We pick a new theme every year, and we thought this year, with it being the bicentennial of Maine, we wanted something that connected to Maine. And so we came up with a question of what did young people think about ideas of how to keep more young people in Maine. So, Michael, can you share with the audience what some of your thoughts were about how we can make sure our talented young people want to stay in Maine after they graduate? And I just want to alert you that one of the things I'm going to do is share a screen showing the essay flyer, but then I'll come back to this view as well. So if you could share some of your thoughts on how to keep young people in Maine.
Yeah. So my essay really focused around the idea of showing youth in Maine a sustainable model for them that works surrounding their futures. So one of the things that we can do to keep young Mainers engaged in their communities is by showing them an educational model that works. And right from the outset, it's important to understand that some young Mainers understand that college is for them and that they see themselves at a 4-year university. Others see themselves at trade schools or community colleges. And Maine is really diverse in the avenues in which young people decide to go in. And so my paper focused on that and how to beef up our public education to show young Mainers a model that works. So one of the things that I found in some of my research was in 2004, Mainers voted on a referendum. I think it was question 1 at the time, and it centered around holding the Maine state legislature accountable for 55% or more of all public school funding in the state of Maine. And 16 years ago, or since the passage of that referendum, the state of Maine, at best, has only achieved 40% of funding, at best, which is 15% under what they had promised to all Maine voters. And that's really troubling because we see schools in rural communities that cannot meet financial need, and schools in wealthier, sometimes more coastal communities that can provide their own educational funding to help their students, have better outcomes largely 4-year universities, and then they go on to make more money than those who otherwise would not. So my paper focused around the idea that Maine could do a better job of supplying state funding to schools for everybody to have an even playing field. And it also focused around um, getting large businesses, manufacturers, research institutions here in the state of Maine to reach out to local public schools, middle schools, high schools, and develop educational programs with them to show young Mainers that there are businesses here in Maine that will give them a future in whatever area they want to do, whether it be science, whether it be trades, whether it be education, journalism. Maine has everything. And we need to do a better job of showing young Mainers that we do have everything. And the way I propose that we do that is to give businesses a break or a subsidy in hopes and in requiring that they do reach out and do form those bonds. So, in short, that's kind of what the paper is centered around.
Very good. The paper earned second place in the competition, and typically, in a typical year, and this has been anything but a typical year, when we have our annual Maine Town meeting, we usually invite the top 3 prize winners to come to the library and receive their award. We had to do a virtual Maine Town meeting this year on May 22nd, so we weren't able to physically have you here at the library, and so weren't able to do one of those check presentation ceremonies. We've never had the big check, but we definitely would have had the little check. So we had to send that to you instead. The second place prize is one that you earned, and we congratulate you on that. And in lieu of the handing over the envelope and the handshake, I just wanted to take this moment to congratulate you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that and the opportunities the library has afforded me.
You're very welcome. But that isn't actually the first time we had met you. We had met you previously through another program called the United States Senate Youth Program, which is conducted throughout the country, and it's coordinated each state by the Department of Education. And it's a program in which 2 high school students are selected to go down to Washington, D.C. to learn about the government. And for the past several years, the competition has been held here at the Margaret Chase Smith Library. And they usually aim for 10 people to come, and they have to be interviewed by a panel of judges, and they have to give a speech. So that's how we first met Michael. And can you just give us a sense of what your experience was on that day, and then we'll go on to discuss more about the Senate Youth Program. And I'm going to put up some pictures of you being here that day, just what your recollections were.
Sure. So, in order to be selected as a Maine state finalist for USSYP, I had to first be nominated as my school's nominee. So I actually applied. I wrote an essay, wrote a short resume with various extracurricular and leadership positions, and I actually applied to my school. Mm-hmm. Once I was selected for that, I sent in my application to the Department of Education here in Maine, and they chose, it was 9 Maine state finalists, and then all 9 finalists from all around the state, from Fort Kent, Biddeford, I guess, were sent to the Margaret Chase Smith Library in November, I believe it was.
It was either at the end of October or the beginning of November, right?
Yeah, so early fall.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sent down there, and we had an interview, as Dr. Richards said, and we also had, we were given a speech prompt, and we had to deliver a speech on the prompt provided that day, prepare it and deliver it with less than, I think, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours.
So this is a picture of you delivering it. Do you remember what the prompt was,
It was,
or what your speech was about?
it had to do with the notion of compromising.
Okay.
And it basically, the prompt asked, what is one issue that you believe the state Senate or the United States Senate should compromise on, and why is compromise necessary in government and in politics and in life?
And do you remember what your issue was?
I think I talked about gun rights and the Second Amendment. And at the time, I believe the day before or 2 days before I gave that speech, there was a mass shooting at a high school somewhere in the South, I believe in Texas. And so that was something that hit home for me 2 days before. And that was something that I thought that I should cover in the speech.
And so you're given time to do research. So here's a picture of you very diligently doing research in the research room, and
Yeah.
looks like working on your talk as well.
Yeah.
So you reminded me that one of the criteria for being eligible is that you have to have had a position of leadership in your school. And what was your leadership position?
At MSSM, our student council is called the Student Senate, and I'm an elected student senator on the Student Senate, and I'm also the academic committee chair. So weekly for my senior year, I would meet with our academic dean and faculty, and we go over academic issues to try and make our school a better academic environment for everybody, students and staff.
So you were selected as one of the top 2 contestants, which then made you eligible to go down to Washington, D.C. I believe it's usually in March where you would go.
Yeah.
Which
this
I was
year
just,
on
March
March
watching the Frontline documentary last night on the timeline of the corona crisis in Maine, in the United States. And March is when we finally started to wake up that this was serious. And I think that was very bad timing for you.
It was. It was weird because we were supposed to go down to Washington on March 7th. I was supposed to fly out of Portland on March 7th. And on March 5th, we had gotten a list of speakers that we would be hearing. A Supreme Court Justice, Secretary of State, a bunch of other really prominent national government officials. We were all really excited about it. In all of our group chats, we were like, couldn't wait to see each other. We've been talking all the delegates have been talking for a few months now. And the next day, I think March 6th, the day before a lot of us were supposed to leave, we got an email saying that the program was canceled, that Washington Week was canceled. The Senate Youth Program also comes with a $10,000 scholarship for college. And we were notified that we would still be receiving our scholarship, but that Washington Week would be canceled. And that was a big wake-up call, I think, for all of us, because at that time, nothing in the U.S. had really had begun to get canceled yet.
Yeah, they were saying last night it was about March 11th is when things really started to get. I remember thinking back here at the library, we had a school group that morning that came, which wound up being our last school group of the spring. And then that afternoon, we were supposed to have a senior citizens group, and they canceled. And like since the morning of March 11th, we haven't seen anyone here at the library.
Yeah.
So
I think
you were almost there. If it had been like a week earlier, you might have made it.
Yeah, I know.
So
and I think.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think March 13th was my last day of high school. They sent us home later that day.
Yeah. You said that you were going to, for example, have the opportunity to meet with a Supreme Court justice. Did it tell you specifically which justice, or just generically it be a Supreme Court justice?
The schedule did have a list of names. They asked us, though, to not share that list of names, just to make it not make it public, but yeah, we were supposed to meet with one Supreme Court justice, a few senators, an ambassador to the U.S.,
Hmm.
and some other really great officials.
So I think you've told me that very disappointing not to be able to go there for the week, but they have tried to supplement with some other opportunities.
Yeah, it just ended, I believe, 2 weeks ago, but they had started a series of what they called USSYP online
Hmm.
um, calls, and so we had Zoom calls with government officials. So we talked with Senator Baldwin from Wisconsin,
Hmm.
various State Department officials, Brian Camoy, who is a former alumni of the program. He's also uh, the associate director of FEMA,
Hmm.
um, and that was really cool. We talked about the coronavirus, all things economy, U.S. relations with China. It was really interesting.
Hmm.
So
So I need to do a little historical plug here, which explains some of the reasons that the library is interested in this program. It's funded by the William Randolph Hearst Foundations, and it started in 1962. And so during the time when Margaret Chase Smith was in the Senate, and I believe it was in 1971, one of the participants was a woman who people will know. Let's see if I can get to the picture here. A young woman from Caribou High School who got invited down to Washington, D.C., Susan Collins. And Senator Collins quite often talks about what a pivotal moment that was in her career and tells the story about how much time Margaret Chase Smith spent with her, encouraging her to pursue her ambition to serve in government. And we're always a little bit wondering whether Senator Smith really spent that amount of time with her. And then we came across a journal entry several years ago, and confirms that Margaret Chase Smith spent well over an hour with her one afternoon.
oh
I think it
wow,
was February of 1971, as the entry that Senator Collins, or Susan Collins at that time, came to speak with Senator Smith. And interestingly, she now holds the seat in the Senate that Margaret Chase Smith had once held. So that is the reason the library has always been interested in the Senate Youth Program. Will they continue to do some of these opportunities, some of these Zoom opportunities?
I think that the online calls have ended, but there's been talk from the USSYP Alumni Association that they're going to try and do something for us soon.
Okay.
So yeah.
Has there been any talk about at some point trying to get you to Washington? I know a lot of groups are talking about, well, we haven't been able to do something this year, but we'll piggyback you on next year. Have they made any discussion of that?
We haven't heard anything from the Hearst Foundation about that, but there's been talk of next year at the alumni dinner of having like a special event. Um, and then, of course, all the delegates from all around the U.S. have been talking to each other,
Mhm.
and we're gonna try to do a big get together, maybe a regional thing,
Mhm.
um, maybe later this summer, early next year. I'm not sure. But
So the other thing I'd like to talk to you about, since we've covered your direct connections to the library, is just what this school year was like for you, especially the second half of the school year. You said
yeah,
that was March 13th that you were sent home.
I think it was the 13th. Yeah.
So how was that experience of, you were already away from home, going to the Maine School of Science and Math. Um, you were in a residential situation for your schooling. How did your education work out from after March 13th, being in Biddeford with your educators being in Limestone?
Yeah. So I think in a really weird way, our school was somewhat well equipped to do this distance learning. Um, Last year or the year before, when the flu outbreak uh, got quite bad in parts of northern Maine, our school actually, just for a precaution, had to send us home.
Mhm.
In I think February of 2020, 18 maybe. And so we had already had practice doing distance learning with kids all around the state,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes 6 hours away. And so we kind of just thought back to 2 years prior, and it went pretty smoothly. We used Google Hangouts for all of our classes and Google Meet. Um, and some teachers did asynchronous learning, some teachers did live lectures. And so it was pretty easy for all the students to adjust. Granted, it was very different from being on campus. And of course, we missed all our friends and um, the social life on campus. But, yeah.
How many students go to the Maine School of Science and Math?
I believe this year was 136, and my graduating class was 36.
Okay.
So,
How did they handle graduation?
um, so we actually haven't had a formal graduation yet.
Mhm.
We have one scheduled for August 15th. We're, we're, we're still not sure what we're going to do yet. I assume it will be up in Aroostook County
Okay.
at school, but we're not sure. We were delivered our caps and gowns and diplomas on May 23rd, which was our normal scheduled graduation. So we had a representative from the board deliver my diploma to my house, and
Oh,
we took some
nice.
nice pictures.
Mhm.
And it was special for me and my family, but it will be great to do that with all of my friends in August
Mhm.
in person, if that can work
Well,
out.
I hope you were able to do that.
Yeah, me too.
So tell us more about the Maine School of Science and Math. I believe it's officially a charter school, so there's kids from all over Maine who are choosing to go there.
Yeah,
What was the attraction for you?
so I, um, like I said, I was born and raised in Biddeford. I went to Biddeford Public Schools from second grade until ninth grade. Um, and my mom is also a teacher in that school.
Hmm.
I actually had my mom as a band teacher for 3 years in middle school.
Hmm.
Um, and so Biddeford is a community that's really near and dear to me. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted something more. I wanted something more rigorous and
Hmm.
challenging. Um, and I had a science teacher in middle school and Putney, and she told me about a summer camp hosted at MSSM.
Okay.
And her two sons had both graduated from MSSM. And I went to this summer camp. I checked it out and I loved it. So I
Mhm.
made the decision to apply. Um, and ever since then, uh, I've been there and I just graduated from there. So that's pretty special, I guess.
So you did your freshman year at Biddeford High School,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
the next 3 years at the Maine School of Science and Math.
Yeah. Sophomore year.
What grades does the Maine School of Science and Math cover?
Freshman through senior.
Okay.
Um, the
So
only,
there are some freshmen there.
yes. The only stipulation is that you can't be a first year senior. You can't start at
Okay.
MSM your first year. Um, so yeah, freshman
And,
through senior.
and it's a residential school.
It is. It's a residential magnet school. So it's actually funded by the state of Maine. So it's considered a public school. Um, the only cost to families is room and board.
Okay.
And uh, there is plenty of financial aid available. So for almost all families, it's very, very affordable
Mhm.
to send your kid there.
It's at the former Air Force Base in Limestone.
Yeah. When the school founded in 1994, 95,
Mhm.
it followed the closure of Loring Air Force Base in Limestone. And for the first 5 years of the school's history, the dorm housing was actually on Loring Air Force Base. But 5 years after the school was founded, it was moved to more downtown Limestone. So now we're about 3 miles away
And did they
from.
do new construction for dormitories?
Yeah, the dorms have been renovated. It's actually, I think, an old school building that they
Okay.
had renovated into our dorms.
Mhm.
Um, and the dorm rooms themselves are much larger than the dorm I'll be in next year.
Okay.
Um, to
Well, let's
say the
let's
least.
hope you are in a dorm next year.
Yeah, I shouldn't jinx it. You're right.
So
But yeah,
that's a good lead in. What are your plans? You're now a high school graduate.
yeah. Next year I will be at the University of Maine, um, majoring in biology, um, and double minoring in political science and economics
Hmm.
on a pre-med track and in the honors college. Um,
Very ambitious.
so we'll see how it goes,
Hmm.
especially with maybe online learning in the fall.
Hmm.
UMaine has said that we will be on campus, but I suspect plans all around the country might change now in late August. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm excited.
Good. And you've run through the litany of a lot of majors there: biology, political science, economics. But
Yeah,
something else I remember you talking about, that you have developed an interest in public health. Can
yeah.
you talk about that?
So starting, um, actually, when I applied to, I'll just say this: when I applied to college, I actually applied to tech schools. I wanted to be a biomedical engineer.
Hmm.
Um, I liked STEM. I liked engineering. Um, I'm not gonna lie, I liked the the pay that a biomedical engineer would make.
Hmm.
That was all
Hmm.
very attractive to me. After USSYP, after engaging in conversations with delegates from all around the country, I realized that I would be missing part of a social science lifestyle and engaging in political discussions if I went the STEM route
Hmm.
through education. So, um, first semester of senior year, I started writing a paper on the US healthcare system
Hmm.
and delving into and separates it from all other countries in the world. And so public health was an issue that really spoke to me as something that we're going to need to work on, especially with the coronavirus outbreak. And I started that research before that, but it's become even more apparent to me the disparities in this country between them. So I hope after my undergraduate education to go either to med school or to get a master's in public health, and to work on some post coronavirus policy research.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, those are my plans.
So that's a very much of interest to us, is that you have this very strong interest in the public policy component
Yeah,
of the fields that you're going to be studying. And,
yeah,
um, and for all the unhappy side effects of the coronavirus that you've had to endure, there's a way that obviously there's an opportunity there for you, because public health has very much come to the fore since March, of how we're going to deal with this crisis. So hopefully you're well positioned.
I hope so.
Maybe not as lucratively positioned, but very important.
Yeah,
One of the things they were talking about in the Frontline documentary last night is countries that had strong public health systems, like South Korea, were pretty much
mhm,
able to nip the pandemic in the bud. And
absolutely.
America, the problem in America is that we didn't have one public health system. At best, we had 50 or 51 public health systems, and it didn't respond very well.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of
so
opportunity out there for you.
for sure.
So how are you going to spend your summer before you hopefully head off to Orono?
Hopefully. Um, this summer, I'm actually continuing research on that healthcare paper that I just mentioned.
Hmm.
I want to include more data and relate that paper to the coronavirus
Hmm.
in real time and how it's affecting us as a country and state. And um, I also, uh, I'm trying to get outdoors a lot, doing some hiking, some beach days. Um, hanging out with my friends at socially distant campfires. Um,
With
but
your
it's
mask
hard.
on?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get a mask tan, so maybe at night with a mask. Um, but One of the things about going to MSSM is that it's really difficult because I have friends now all over the state, and I even have some friends in South Korea that go to school with me. So it's really hard. We're all across the world now, and in Ukraine too. Um, but we're making it work. We're staying busy, um, and looking forward to what college will hopefully bring this
Mhm.
fall. Yeah.
So you mentioned the paper, you're still working on it. Are you just doing that for yourself, or are you doing it as some other larger project?
Yeah. So, well, the paper began as a project for a senior literature class that I had at school. It was a senior research course
Mhm,
at MSSM, and so it was required for class at the time.
mhm,
But the class ended in December. I turned in like my draft required for the class then, but I've kind of slowly been working on it ever since the class ended in December, and kind of expanding on the research that I had and the stories that I wanted to tell,
mhm.
to talk about the U.S. healthcare system.
How many pages is it?
Currently, I think it's 22.
Okay.
So.
And then I'm intrigued by your interest in the outdoors and hiking. Have you done some hikes already this year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm also planning one with some friends from school later this summer to hike Katahdin.
Have, have,
Um,
have you done it before?
I did it last September for the first time. It
What
was
trail did you
beautiful.
take?
I don't remember actually. I need You're the second person to
You
ask me that
you
this
weren't the
week.
leader.
I was not. I went with some friends from school.
Okay.
Actually, two teachers from school. It was an MSSM trip.
Mhm.
Uh, did that our school did.
And
So
have you talked about what trail you're going to take this time? You're going to try to do a different route?
I know we are doing a different route, but I'm also not the leader of this hike.
Okay.
So I'll do some investigative work and get back to you
All right.
about the trip. But
Well,
yeah,
I'm hoping to get up there at some point. I usually do it in September, but we'll see. My schedule be maybe a little more wide open this summer to be able to do it, and then
yeah,
having to work it around whatever the schedule of Baxter State Park is going to wind up being too.
yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very much. We've already been discussing for a half hour, and I try to keep these to a half hour. And I want to wish you well as you move on to the next stages of your career. I'm hoping we'll stay in contact since you'll be at the University of Maine. And as I've told you, that
Absolutely.
there is a Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center there with some
Yeah.
opportunities for some Margaret Chase Smith scholarships, given your interest in public policy. So hopefully we'll see more of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richards. I really appreciate it.
All right. Goodbye.